The 2018 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Brought to you from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. The Republican race for the 10th Congressional District.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Bellamy, a multimedia journalist with 11 Alive, and welcome to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting in Atlanta. This is the debate among Republican candidates for Georgia's Congressional District 10. District 10 includes the eastern part of the state, including Athens, Milledgeville, Monroe, Watkinsville, and Winder. Let's meet the candidates. They are in alphabetical order. Bradley Griffin owns a digital marketing company and a North Florida landscaping business. Jody Heiss has served in the U.S. Congress for the 10th District since 2015. He is also a pastor. And Joe Hunt is vice president of franchise relations at a major corporation in the restaurant industry. Now let's introduce you to our panelists. Meredith Anderson is an investigative reporter at WRDW-TV in Augusta, Georgia. Blake Ott is the editor of Flagpole magazine in Athens, Georgia. And Raul Bali is a news anchor for Oconee Radio Group, which includes stations in Greensboro, Madison, and in Milledgeville. Now, to start the debate, each candidate will be asked one question by one of the panelists. Meredith, we'll get started with you.
My question is for Jody Heiss. As a member of the House Natural Resources Committee, you have a voice for a lot of people, our viewers at WRDW, who work at Plant Vogtle, a project that is several years, 3-4 years behind schedule, more than $3 billion over budget. We watched in South Carolina when the V.C. Sumner project was abandoned, and it has a lot of fear that the same will happen at Vogtle. What will you do to make sure that the Vogtle project continues?
Well, I don't think we have to worry about what happened at Sumter. Quite frankly, we've got a state that's very much involved and interested in keeping Plant Vogtle going on a personal basis. We've been heavily involved in making sure that the nuclear tax credits were continued to be applied to Plant Vogtle, and I'm excited that has happened. And so now it's a partnership really between the state and the federal government. I think things are well in the way. This is a huge factor for maintaining low-cost energy for the state of Georgia and the region and the Southeast, and I believe we're going to succeed in seeing this thing completed.
All right, well, we'll now go to you for a question for Joe Hunt.
Mr. Hunt, one issue that you've been discussing is improving economic success in rural areas. And one issue that I've been covering on a regular basis in the district is rural broadband. What can the federal government do? What can you do in Washington to improve internet access, whether it's faster access, cheaper access, or just in some cases, dependable access?
The dependable access in rural broadband is a critical element for the farmers in a very agrarian district. And it comes down to, in some cases, having to take time away from the farm to go into town to pay bills at the bank, which otherwise could be and should be done online. So the infrastructure for higher speed internet, and if that means fiber cable, if that means a different cable line that needs to be run, the infrastructure for that should be taken care of and taken care of quickly so that those farmers can get to tending to their businesses, which is providing food for the nation, consumables for the nation, rather than having to take time out of a busy day that is already sun up to sundown to go pay a bill.
Thank you. Blake, we'll now give you an opportunity to ask Mr. Griffin a question.
All right, Mr. Griffin, given that you're in the digital marketing business, there's been a lot of discussion lately about data collection online and how that data is used and the effect that it's had on our democratic process. So do you think social media should be regulated to protect users' privacy?
So first and foremost, I think that anybody that uses a third-party service, like social media, for example, needs to expect that the private company that owns that third-party service is going to be doing different things in order to improve their service offering. And so one of those things is to track different behaviors and different usage ways by those clients to go ahead and make that product better or safer for folks in the future. Now, that being said, I think that you're under an obligation as a private business owner to go ahead and alert any of your users of your product as far as those different things happening, so that you give them an opportunity to opt out of those different data tracking and different service points, if that's something they can do, or if it's something you can't opt out of, then something that they can steer clear of so that they don't get involved in that process. Thank you.
That concludes the first portion of the debate. The candidates will now ask a question of one of their opponents. Each candidate will have 30 seconds to ask the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. Now, by random selection, Joe Hunt, you may ask the first question of one of your opponents.
Thank you. Congressman Heiss, you have said that Islam is not a religion and does not therefore deserve First Amendment protections. You've also made well known your disapproval of civil rights protections for homosexuals, and you've said that women should only run for political office if they are, quote unquote, under the authority of their husbands. How is it that you can be representative of a district of people whom you hold such disdain for?
Well, that's a mouthful, and I thank you for your question, Joe. Listen, I made it very, very, very clear, abundantly clear, on the comments between Muslim and Islam. Those who practice the tenets of Islam, the 5 basic tenets, deserve every much right as everyone else. But I made clear my comments were directed towards radical Islamists, where there is most certainly a religious component. But it's a geopolitical system. It has its own military, its own law, its own financing system, and that's a totally different scenario. When it relates to the thing, listen, when it comes to running for politics, any spouse should be heavily involved in the decision. Running for public office has a great impact on families, and it has a great sacrifice. And I believe any spouse, I know my wife and I, we talked and prayed a lot before we made the decision. I imagine you and your wife did the same thing. So I think any spouse will talk very much before entering into public office.
Congressman Heiss, can you address the rest of that question?
Which part?
Would you like to reiterate, Mr. Hunt, the end part of your question, if you will?
How can you be representative of a district of folks that you hold disdain for?
Well, I don't hold disdain for anyone. You know, I mean, people have different views on a variety of different things, but I represent the 10th District. I don't care if a person is a Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter if they're a Christian or an atheist or whatever gender preference or whatever. We all, as Americans, gather around certain things that we agree on, the Constitution, liberty, and justice, and I represent everyone. I don't have disdain for everyone, for anyone. We certainly, people have differing views, but that doesn't equate to disdain. I certainly don't have disdain for anyone.
Thank you. Do you have a rebuttal or response? All right. Congressman Heiss, now to you to ask a question.
Yeah, I don't have a question of great import, but I will just say this, Joe. I know and I appreciate the fact that you have worked with Zaxby's on a corporate level, and I love Zaxby's, but frankly, since July 4th, haven't eaten there, and most of my team has not eaten there. And I can't wait to change that, but I'd love to sit down and chat with you about your experience there and more about Zaxby's. So regardless of the outcome of this, my question is, well, can we sit down at Zaxby's and have lunch after all this is over with?
You betcha, I'm buying.
Oh, well, that's even better. Thank you very much.
All right, Bradley Griffin, it is now your turn to ask a question of one of your opponents.
Sure. So I have a question for Jody as well. Jody, in 2014, federal agents actually investigated your campaign after one of your paid staff members actually pled guilty to a crime. Additionally, after that, you've failed to fulfill most, if not all, of your different campaign promises. And so, given your campaign's illegal behavior and also the numerous lies and failings of your campaign throughout the last 3 years, why should the 10th congressional districts trust you to lead them in the right direction?
I have no idea of anyone being arrested or committing a crime on my campaign. I'm clueless what in the world you're talking about with that, to be very honest. But listen, I've been committed to keep the promises I've kept. I've said that I would stand for our Constitution, that I would stand for the values of the 10th District, which include our Constitution, defending life, our Second Amendment, religious liberty, getting behind our president for lower taxes and strengthening our military, defending the border, all of those things I've done and do each and every day that I'm in Congress, and it's a great honor to be able to represent the district in that regard. But I know of no issue where someone has violated the law in our campaign.
Mr. Griffin, do you have a response, a rebuttal?
Yeah, so Congressman Heiss actually gave a comment to the different media outlets that were investigating the federal agent's investigation. You can actually find that information on Twitter, where I've posted it at Griff for Congress. That article from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution can be found there. In addition, you know what, I think that it's good to leave that there for now. Thank you so much.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. That concludes our second round. For those of you just joining us, this is the debate between the Republican candidates for Georgia's Congressional District 10. We will now go back to our panel to ask questions of the candidate of his or her choice until we run out of time. As a point of moderator privilege, I may step in and ask a question of the candidates as well. I will also determine when a rebuttal is appropriate. Meredith Anderson, first question goes to you this round.
My question goes to all three of you. If you were to give President Trump a grade for how well he's done so far as president, what would that be and why?
Mr. Griffin, we'll start with you and go in alphabetical order.
Thank you so much. It's a fantastic question. And to be honest with you, I'd be real hard-pressed not to give the president somewhere in that B+ to A- range. And the reason being is because he's been dealing with a federal prosecution team that's literally been crawling inside of every different area trying to catch him in some sort of a crime or doing something wrong. And despite of that, he's actually been able to accomplish 65% of his agenda in the first year alone. And he's making great strides on some of these other areas, like, for example, with North Korea and denuclearization. And so given the adversity and given what he's dealt with in that period of time and given what he's been able to accomplish, like the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is one of the big platforms he got elected on, you know, I'm a huge Trump supporter, and I think he's done fantastic. Thank you.
Congressman Heiss?
Yeah, I would absolutely give the president an A. I think he's done a spectacular job in just over a year. And again, with the opposition that has been relentless, I mean, we've been able to see regulations cut back enormously. The economic engine is back in play. We've all seen records in the markets time and time again. The military is back. As was mentioned, North Korea is coming back to the table. I mean, we've had one administration after another has never been able to accomplish that. And so you look at one accomplishment after another. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, it's just been remarkable to me, in spite of enormous opposition, the things that the president's been able to move forward, and it's been an honor to be behind him and trying to help in those battles as much as possible. The tax cuts bill, first time in over 30 years. So I give him an A, solid A. Proud of him.
Mr. Hutton, how do you?
All the list of accomplishments is not worthy of reiterating because it's been said twice already. But I agree with both of my opponents on the accomplishments related to policy. My grade is probably a little more stiff and difficult in that C+, and that's still positive momentum. There are tremendous accomplishments that have happened, but I do maintain that there is a certain level of expectation in behavior that you have of the most powerful leader in the free world. And while I do appreciate that in tweets he is talking directly to me and directly to his constituents and directly to the public, and that is something that no other president has done with the same ability that President Trump has done. But in many cases, that behavior is petty and childish, and I think that there is a higher expectation of behavior for that office.
All right, thank you. Royal Ballet, it is now your turn to ask a question of our candidates.
My question is for Congressman Heiss. Congressman, you voted for tax reform in December. You just talked about that a few moments ago. Many of the provisions in that tax reform package are going to sunset in 2025. Where do you stand on extending those tax cuts? And I ask this question in the context of last month, you voted against the $1.3 trillion budget with raising concerns about the national debt. Where do you stand when you put those two issues next to each other?
Yeah, listen, you're absolutely right. The national debt is something that we can no longer turn our heads to. It's a serious problem, and we have got to get our financial house in order. And with that, as far as the sunsetting, the tax bill supposedly is a $1.5 trillion deficit over 10 years. But that's based on static scoring. I don't have time to get into all of that. It does not take into consideration, however, the economic growth that is produced. That scoring was based on 1.9 to 2% growth. We're already at 2.3 to 2.4, which at 2.3, it's deficit neutral over 10 years. So I'm confident that the economic boost that comes from the tax bill will help us, but we can't continue going in debt. That is something we've got to stop. The spending madness, and that's why I voted against the budget. It's not to mention it was over 2,000 pages, highest spending bill in the history of the world. We didn't even have time to read it. So there's no way I'm going to vote for something like that.
Congressman, thank you. Blake, we'll now turn to you for another question from our candidates.
Sure. Since we've already heard Congressman Heiss and Mr. Griffin talk about a little bit about the federal investigation into the Trump administration, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Hunt, if you were elected to Congress and the president were to fire Robert Mueller, what would your reaction be?
Wow. So the premise behind launching the investigation is somewhat questionable in that the origins are based on a document that was paid for by a competing political organization. And so the premise behind launching the general counsel or special counsel for the investigation has to be called into question first. But I think the reputation that Mr. Mueller carries in the FBI and the intelligence community, and frankly with most of Congress, deems that whatever he is tasked to do, he should finish that job. And I would be very shocked by any mentioning of the fact that he may be fired or would be fired. That would be a mistake, in my opinion.
Thank you. Meredith, we'll go back to you for another question.
Okay. Representative Heiss, the school shooting in Florida put the AR-15 in the spotlight once again. And as a member of the NRA, the Gun Owners of America, do you think that particular weapon was one the forefathers had in mind when they were drafting the Second Amendment?
I think the recent shootings, be it at a school or a church or a concert, all of them highlight the reality that we have a problem in this country, a moral and spiritual problem, not a gun ownership problem. And no, I do not believe that the government should ever restrict, harass, punish, or penalize law-abiding citizens for exercising the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms.
This topic has been a big discussion among all voters all over the nation. So I want to give you other candidates an opportunity to respond to that question as well. We'll start with you, Mr.
Thank you. You know, right there in the Constitution, it says shall not be infringed when it talks about the Second Amendment, right? And so my personal beliefs, having faith in the framers and having faith in the folks that wrote the Constitution, is that they actually did know what they were doing in regards to providing us with the Second Amendment right in order to hold our government accountable if they should ever become tyrannical, right? And so at the end of the day, I'm a huge advocate for Second Amendment rights. The one thing that I actually would like to add is an increased training as well as increased education around these different firearms, because to be honest, we can't have a fair and even field playing conversation when half of the population who's looking to ban these firearms isn't coming with the same amount of education with those different firearms in mind. And so once we're all educated to the same point, we can have a better discussion on what these tools are used for and how we can deal with those different issues. But I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Hunt?
I believe wholeheartedly that training especially for first-time purchases of firearms needs to be mandatory. I also believe in strict and thorough background checks. I have to have a background check to coach my son's Little League basketball team. So for us to require that of gun owners, I have absolutely no issue and believe that those should be strict and fair and applied across the board. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I believe that that right shall not be infringed. And I also agree that the laws that we make apply to those who are law-abiding, and anyone intent on breaking laws. There's no new law that's going to help prevent that. But I do think that we need to take a long, hard, serious look at aftermarket accessories that belong to weapons that are sold, and take a look at what types of restrictions may need to be put on those.
Gentlemen, thank you. Raul, we'll go down to you for another question.
My next question is for Bradley Griffin. Mr. Griffin, should people living in Georgia who are in the United States illegally be counted in the 2020 census?
Yes, they absolutely should, because at the end of the day, from just a pure economic standpoint, we have resource scarcity. It's a real thing, right? So we only have so many resources to be able to go around into these different communities and into these different cities to make sure that we're taking care of these different needs. And so if we're ignoring an entire population, there's not going to be enough resources to go around at the end of the day, because if a community believes they need quantity, say 100 widgets, just hypothetically speaking, and we only send 100, but really we needed 150 or 200 widgets, we got a real problem. We got people that are now even in worse situations than they were originally. And so at the end of the day, data is important. What that reflects and what that teaches us, that can be based on the different questions we ask, but having all of the right information so that we can make educated, full decisions, that's the way we need to way we need to operate. Thank you.
Congressman Heiss and Mr. Hunt, let's give you both 30 seconds to respond to that question as well. There's no harm done in knowing who's in this country. But the question, the issue comes when those who are here influence the number of representatives that a state has. And the concept, as I understand it in the Constitution, representatives are based upon American citizens in the district, not just numbers of people. And therein becomes a great problem that needs to be corrected. So I don't think that the numbers should influence the number of representatives from whatever state it may be. That needs to be reserved for citizens. Thank you.
And while that is true, the fact of the matter is that apportionment for House representation is granted based on the number of people, not the number of citizens. And what we want is a true and accurate count, which is why it is important that the question about citizenship be added back to the 2020 census this year.
Thank you all. That is all the time that we have for questions for each candidate. We will now have a 60-second period for closing statements. Jody Heiss, we'll begin with you. You'll get that first opportunity for a closing statement.
Thank you so much for having us here today. It's an honor to be able to represent the 10th District of Georgia. It's been the greatest honor of my life, and I deeply appreciate the voters entrusting me with that. Since being elected and starting to serve in 2015, it has been a great responsibility, and one that I don't take lightly. And now with the election of Donald Trump, it's been an honor to stand alongside of him and help on major issues, from tax cuts to strengthening our military to defending our borders and lowering costs on health care. And personally, we've been heavily involved in the issues that are important to the 10th District, from defending life and the Second Amendment and religious liberties to our Constitution in general. I would ask sincerely for your continued support and your vote in the 10th District so that we can continue to renew America and make it great again. Thank you very much.
Bradley Griffin, it is now your turn for a closing statement.
Thank you. In this race, I'm the only military veteran. I actually served as an airborne ranger with the 75th Ranger Regiment at Fort Benning, Georgia. In this race, I'm also the only national business owner. I founded a digital marketing agency, and I grew that to include clients throughout the entire United States. And so that's really allowed me to work with different cultures and different people to come together and really learn to appreciate the different needs and really just the different requirements of folks that are in different communities in different areas across the country. And so My pledge is to always have the difficult discussions. My pledge is to always show up at every single event that I'm asked to be there because it's difficult, but it needs to happen because I'm representing everybody. And at the end of the day, I will not be outworked, and I will not rest until we start to push some different bipartisan things that we can do right now for you at home. And so I thank you for watching, and God bless. Thank you.
And Joe Hunt, you get the final closing statement in this debate.
Thank you, and I thank both of you gentlemen for your service to the country. It's commendable, and I'm appreciative for what you've done. The important thing here is that you have a choice, and the question now is what choice to make. There are divisive languages, words, thoughts, actions that have been used. And are we in a mood where we want to further divide this country and further polarize the politics that are associated with it? Or are we in the mood to choose candidates that seek out economic solutions? And I'm the only candidate standing here today who wakes up every day thinking about the household economics of every single voter in this district. I have solutions that put more money in your wallet. I have solutions that give you more money for every tax dollar that you contribute. We leverage those tax dollars.
All right, thank you so much. That concludes our debate. We would like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held on Tuesday, May 22nd, and early voting has already begun. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club and all of the debates they will host this primary election season, visit atlantapressclub.org. This debate will be archived there and on Georgia Public Broadcasting's website, gpb.org. I'm Jennifer Bellamy, and thank you for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series.